as we kick off, I want to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands we're joining from today. We'd love for you to share in the chat where you're joining from today, the lands that you're living and working on. I'm currently working on the lands of the Gadigal people, although I'm usually on the lands of the Kaurna people in South Australia in Adelaide. And I want to pay my respects to elders past and present and recognise the deep, enduring connection of our First Nations people to this land, its waters, and our communities. In our work, we hope to be guided by their wisdom and honouring Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledge as an essential part of our mission. As I mentioned, for those who have just joined, I'm Renee, and I am the Academy Program Manager with Work4Climate. And to open the session today, I'd like to share an excerpt from a poem by Marge Piercy called The Low Road. Before I do, I want to give us all a moment to pause and land in the session. Perhaps you've jumped into this webinar from a work meeting. Maybe you've been right in the middle of a task and you looked at the time and you thought, oh, I've got to join quick. So I want to just create some space for us to arrive here in this room together. So I want to invite you all to just sit back in your chair, place your feet on the ground if you can, and take 2 slow, deep breaths through your nose and down into your belly. You can close your eyes if you like as you sit there and continue to breathe deeply while I read out this excerpt from the poem. It goes on one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again and they said no. It starts when you say we and know who you mean. And each day you mean one more. Now I welcome you back into the room. You can open your eyes and join back into the Zoom room, land here together. This session today is going to be a little bit more interactive than most webinars. We're going to be using the chat, and there's going to be breakout rooms to give you an opportunity to chat with other climate concerned employees, others who are thinking just like you. Given the interactive nature of the chat session, we will follow Chatham House rule to maintain confidentiality and privacy. This means that you can absolutely share information from the session with others, but please ensure that you don't share who said it or which company that they work for. We want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable to discuss sensitive topics openly and freely. It would be great if you can keep your videos on too, if you're comfortable doing so, because this helps us share and build that sense of togetherness. And it's just nice to see everybody's faces and, not talk into the void. We encourage you to use the chat to share your thoughts and comments as we move through the session. It's been great to see where everybody's joining from today. We're from all over this beautiful country. And if you have questions as we're presenting the content, we encourage you to actually drop them in the Q&A area rather than the chat. As you can see, the chat kind of disappears really quickly, and as we're sharing and talking with you, it's hard for us to keep up with that. So the Q&A function is going to help us be able to make sure that we are answering the questions that you're asking. If you can't find it, you might have to press more at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and then you'll find the Q&A section. And you can actually upvote other questions as well. So if you see a question that you really like, please upvote it. That'll send it to the top of our screen and we'll be able to answer it. Some of the other questions we'll answer live. Some of them we'll answer in the question box via chat or via writing the answers. And depending on how many questions we get, we might not be able to answer them all. But if we have ones that we can't answer live here today, we'll send the answers in a subsequent email. So don't worry if it doesn't get answered today, we will get there. Finally, as facilitators, we will strive to make this session feel as kind and supportive and inclusive as possible. And we do invite you to adhere to these principles to the best of your ability. To quote Michael Brooks, be ruthless to systems, be kind to people. We encourage you to be uncompromising on calling out where your company isn't doing enough, but call in individuals with compassion. Now I will pass over to Lucy, who's going to take us through our first part of the webinar. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much, Renee. And it's great to see everyone on this call. I'm going to talk us through the concept that every job is a climate job. And before we kick off, I want to set the scene. You might have heard this line before. We couldn't agree more. Every job should be a climate job, but unfortunately, it's not at the moment. And at this moment in time, the election in the US, COP is going on. We know that it is more important than ever that every job is a climate job. And we need to change the paradigm of who gets to work on climate and sustainability. We need everyone in every role thinking about what it will take for their corporation to do their bit for the climate. A big message that we'd like to leave you with is that anyone can be a climate leader. Real leadership has nothing to do with hierarchy or title or positional power. Similarly, climate leadership isn't just for those with sustainability in their titles. Whether you're a junior employee or a senior executive, anyone can step up and be a climate leader. All it requires is choosing to act and using the resources, relationships, and knowledge that you already have to influence your organization to prioritize sustainability and resource it accordingly. Many people think that retraining in sustainability, getting a qualification, or quitting work to work for a climate focused org are the best ways to have an impact on climate through their work. But in fact, staying where you are and influencing your current company from within can be much more impactful. By influencing change from your existing role, you also avoid spending time and energy on that retraining and job hunting. So, firstly, we know that many of you are time poor. So, we want to stress being a climate leader doesn't have to take up a lot of time or bandwidth. And this webinar is designed to paint that picture for you of what it means practically to be a climate leader and make your job a climate job. But first, I'll introduce you to us so that you know a little bit more about the Work for Climate team. And I want to get you guys to interact with each other. So we're going to start with a small icebreaker. It's going to help you reconnect with why you joined this workshop and help us start to get to know who's in the room today. We're going to do a quick chat-based activity. So please take a minute to share in the chat your response to these two questions. Number one, what sector do you work in? And number two, why are you here today? Now, I'm just reading through and seeing that we've got people in community service, local government, arts and creative, people already in the climate movement. Welcome. Thank you for coming. This is great. Insurance. I want to be a part of the solution, not the problem. Great sector.
So many different sectors. This is amazing. We've got sustainable agriculture, aged care services, architecture, education. Wow.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling through. This is brilliant. Welcome. Welcome, everyone.
Imagine the impact we can have across all of these sectors with all of this passion here. I love it.
Yeah, love your energy, Renee. Thank you. All right, I think we've got loads and loads of people have commented there. So please jump on into the chat if you haven't already. And now we will run through quickly the agenda of what we're going to cover today. So we're going to start with a quick presentation on the role of business in addressing the climate crisis. And we'll do an activity to support you in identifying what changes you'd like to see in the business or the sector that you work for. Will then help you to identify your role as a climate leader in influencing these changes based on your existing skills, your knowledge, and your role. Finally, we're going to help you translate this into an action plan to move forward with in the real world. Very quickly, I'll give you a snapshot of us and we'll introduce ourselves. And first of all, I want to say a huge thank you to Renee for opening this session up today. Renee is our Academy Program Manager, stepped in to help me lead this session today. And we also have our Marketing Manager, Sarah MacDonald, on the call. There's a couple of other Work for Climate team members based in Australia and Europe who aren't all on the call today. But a bit about me, because maybe it's relevant to you all. I'm not from the climate movement, didn't know anything really about climate and sustainability. I worked in the world of brand marketing and advertising for just over a decade and was lucky enough to spend a chunk of that time at Intrepid Travel. And working at Intrepid was where I first learned about the potential for businesses to be a positive lever in the world and to create positive impact. I spent a lot of time working on purpose initiatives as a core part of my role. At the end of 2019 and the start of 2020, I suppose it's easy to cast your mind back to the bushfires in Australia. They were raging out of control. The student strikes had galvanized thousands of people like me to head out on the streets and join them, people who maybe had never protested before. And I was motivated to really go all in on applying my skills, capabilities, and professional resources to climate action. So I joined the founding team of Work for Climate in 2020 and have been here since then. I'll hand over quickly to Cam.
Thanks, Lucy. Great to be here and great to see so many faces on this call. 77 people, I think, or 76 now, which is pretty amazing. Yeah, I'm Cam and I'm Head of Learning at Work for Climate. And I'm joining you today from the lands of the Wurundjeri people here in Naarm, Melbourne. I spent the first half of my career in the corporate sector where I was working as an impact measurement consultant, and I was helping not-for-profits and government departments develop more impactful environmental initiatives. Eventually, I got a bit tired of being a step removed from the coalface of driving change. So I founded a social enterprise, which was all about reducing social isolation through community events. And through doing that work, I discovered the real power of facilitation to support transformational group experiences. And that then eventually led me back into the corporate sector and into designing and delivering online learning. All the while, the climate crisis was deepening in the background. And after a while, I felt really drawn to use what I'd learnt about online learning to support the movement to drive more meaningful corporate action, which eventually led me here to Work for Climate. So that's me in a nutshell. I'll pass back to Lucy.
Thanks, Cam. So a little bit about Work for Climate. Some of you might have heard of us and others may be thinking, what even is this? Our mission is to grow the power of employees to transform corporations from within in order to halt climate destruction, and ensure a livable planet. Because, and we all know this, so nod along if you agree, business as usual is failing us, and corporate greed and greenwashing are costing us our last chance of a livable planet. So, Work for Climate was created as a way to influence the decisions that are getting made inside of companies on climate and apply a handbrake on emissions growth inside the largest corporations on the planet. And we do that by inviting people like you to join a movement of employees all around the world who are working to transform their corporations from within. And there's three core pillars to our program that you can see on screen. So content, our free digital learning content that's designed to introduce you to the technical and leadership curriculum that we teach and really enable you to start from where you are with the tools and the resources that are available to you. This is mainly delivered through our social channels, our weekly newsletter, and workshops like these. The second is our courses. So our flagship course is the Work for Climate Academy, which is a facilitated cohort-based course open to employees of large corporations with content that combines technical knowledge like emissions measurement with leadership and influence training. This workshop today is designed to be a small taster of some of the content in our academy, and it's really there to help you step up and supercharge your efforts as a climate leader. And the third pillar is community. So our Work for Climate learning community is for current and previous Academy members with ongoing access to our course materials, events, and a closed peer-to-peer network, because this work really can be challenging and lonely, and also because it's emergent, right? There's not a lot of safe spaces for climate action and climate organizing on the inside of companies. So this is a space to exchange knowledge and enable the cross-pollination of insights and ideas. All three pillars are designed to help you take tangible, practical action that moves the needle as much as possible when it comes to tackling the climate crisis. In the next slide, we're going to look at the role of business. So we're going to assume that everyone in this workshop agrees that climate change is a serious problem. It's caused by humans, and most importantly, we can do something about it. In this session, we're going to focus on the role of businesses in helping us meet global emissions targets. We all know that emissions are going up year on year instead of down, and it doesn't matter how many climate tech solutions we can accelerate. If we don't apply the brake inside corporations to slow emissions growth, we will drive humanity straight off the cliff edge. And so we need businesses to start making decisions for climate and leading the transition. At Work for Climate, we see three main roles that businesses can play in this transition. Before we share them, what do you think those three roles might be? Feel free to drop your ideas in the chat. And thanks for your contributions in the chat as well. I'm trying to keep one eye on it, but there's lots of people here. So leadership, funding, yes and yes to both of those. Community, lead by good example, transformation, innovation, policy development, circular economy, clear emission. I feel like there's a lot of experience and knowledge in this webinar space today. These are exactly the kind of things that we're thinking about too. And also, we know that some of you might not work for a business. You might be in academia or government or an NGO. So consider it through the lens of how your work intersects with businesses and the key roles of business in the transition. Yep, great. Reliable leadership. Absolutely. Okay, so let's click through what we've got on this slide. Number one, reduce emissions across their own operations and their entire value chain, and to really contribute to that global net zero target of net zero 2050. Number two is to, and you put this in the chat, a couple of you, shape government policy and create the public and political context for change. And number three is to build the low carbon products and services the world needs. And note that when we say build low carbon products and services the world needs, the emphasis is on the second part, what society needs, versus creating products purely as a mechanism to generate profit, regardless of the value of the product to society. How can businesses innovate the way that we manufacture and distribute products and services in a way that helps us stay within our remaining carbon budget? And is that even possible? How can businesses focus on helping society adapt to the levels of global warming that are already locked in? And most importantly, the thing that I care deeply about is how do we erode the social license of the businesses that promote hyperconsumption of material goods? So today, most companies focus on number one, reduce climate pollution, and they also tend to focus on their own operations and neglect the value chain part because it's harder. So the way that we address this is through the Work for Climate blueprint. So if we click through to the next slide, the Work for Climate blueprint is basically a high-level overview of the most critical ways that companies can have a positive impact on climate. And we teach it to employees to help you analyze where you can have the fastest, biggest impact, as well as helping you to assess how well your company is really doing on climate, regardless of what the current claims or targets might suggest. There are 5 focus areas which sit within 2 broader buckets. One is energy, and the other is influence. So these are the 2 key ways that corporations have the power to change the trajectory on climate change. Within each broad bucket, there is a critical shift or a focus area that directs you to the actual changes that need to happen inside your company. So the first bucket is the energy they use in the production, delivery, and use of their products and services. And this is what results in emissions going up or down. In our courses, we break this into two technical areas that we deep dive into. The first is switching to 100% renewable energy, and the second is science-aligned net zero and interim emissions reduction targets. So on the other side, we have the influence bucket, which addresses the emissions your corporation creates or hopefully reduces through its broader actions. The first is money and financed emissions. So where your company's corporate cash sits, including who it banks with, who it invests with, what default superannuation funds it uses. Next is lobbying and advocacy, which is about using your company's voice and influence to advocate for positive solutions instead of lobbying to maintain the status quo, which many corporations currently do. Then we have Scope X, which is about the emissions that are enabled through professional services companies when they serve their clients. For example, the fossil fuel industry or automakers. I'm going to take a pause and see if there's any questions that you have about what we've shared so far. So drop them into the Q&A panel, which you can access via that control bar at the bottom of the Zoom window. It might be under the More button if you can't see it. So any questions that you have about that blueprint and those two areas of energy and influence?
There's no questions in there so far, Lucy, but we've got a comment from Glenn that I'm interested to hear your take on. Glenn says, I tried to get my then employer to switch banks for its banking as that bank was investing in coal mines to past 2050, and so I was sacked.
Wow. Glenn, I'm really sorry to hear that that was your experience. And no doubt there is deeper context to that story. The first thing I would say is that's really brave to be having those conversations and highlights to me that this work is like it's challenging and there are risks to people advocating for climate inside of their companies and figuring out what your own personal risk appetite is in this work and developing some boundaries around how you advocate for particular things and the ways in which you advocate for particular things are critical. We hope to equip employees with processes and approaches that allow you to maintain a level of safety when you're advocating for these type of things. But I'd be keen to talk to you more offline about your experience to learn more about that individual situation. Man, that sucks, but thank you for doing that work. This is the work.
There's a few more questions in the Q&A box now, Lucy. Oh, there's lots coming through actually. There's a question around the difference between Scope 3 and Scope X.
That's a great question. Scope X is one of those things that's now getting informally labeled as Scope 4, which is the emissions that you influence. And there's other things that come into that, advertised emissions, insured emissions as well. I think the difference is that Scope 3 is connected to supply chain of like your manufacturing and distribution and it's one step closer to the Scope 1. So if you imagine Scope 1's at the center of concentric circles, Scope 4 is out there, like it's creating emissions, but it's creating Scope 1 emissions.
Do you have a list of climate positive businesses, suppliers that we can utilize? Energy providers, insurance providers, I imagine superannuation providers. What's your take on that, Lucy?
Yeah, so WorkforClimate will point you to the resources, the scorecards, the groups that are doing that analysis. We don't we don't keep a list of companies that we would recommend, but we would send you to the expert groups. For example, we would direct you to Climate Integrity. If you're looking for the companies who have the most progressive climate lobbying, you could look at the scorecard that's created by Climate Integrity and Influence Map. If you're looking for a bit of a scorecard or a breakdown on financial institutions, banks, and insurance, we would direct you to Market Forces, who do really thorough research and analysis of that kind of thing. So yes, can definitely help with those.
Probably have time for one more question, I reckon.
Yeah, I was going to jump in to the how do you change the company to 100% renewable energy when their landlords are unwilling or there aren't 100% renewable options? That is a great question. Thank you, A Climate for Art, for adding that one in. So the journey for switching your organization to 100% renewable energy, we've kind of mapped out that journey based on interviewing dozens and dozens of people inside companies who have been through this process. And regardless of whether the company owns the asset or the property, or if there's a landlord, there are pathways. You don't have to figure this out as if you're the first person inside a company. So we have a bunch of resources. We have the 100% renewable energy playbook, which kind of walks you through that stuff. But yeah, there's answers, and it depends on the individual organization's situation. But that's something that we do have a bit of experience. And we've got a bunch of employees who are inside the Work4Climate community that can share their experiences with you as well. Thanks for that question.
All right, so now we're going to jump into our first activity for the session. And this is about identifying or clarifying the ultimate changes that you'd love to see at your company in relation to climate. To help you capture your thoughts, we've created a climate action canvas. And you're going to see a link to that coming through in the chat in a second. And we're going to use this to gather our thoughts. So we'll fill it out together as we move through the different activities. Right, so by the end of this activity, we hope you'll have a bit of a clearer sense of the changes you'd like to influence in your company with respect to climate. We've provided some prompts at the bottom of this slide. So you've already seen the blueprint just before, so that's familiar. And the first prompt we want you to consider is, where is your company on its climate impact journey currently? So we provided 5 of the critical areas that companies can have the most impact on, or that we believe anyway. And you may not know where your company is at currently in terms of progress on each of these, or you may only know about a few of them, or for some, maybe none at all. That's fine. Just write down what you do know and spend a couple of minutes researching to see if you can fill any blanks. There's often information you can find about your company either online or in your intranet. So that's the first question. And the second question is, what changes do you ultimately want to see to increase your company's positive impact on climate? So for example, you might want your company to commit to 100% renewable energy target, or shift your default employee retirement fund to a more climate-friendly one. For now, I really want to stress we're not trying to limit ourselves to things that we can personally influence. This is a kind of blue sky thinking, dream big moment. And a reminder that we're not talking about recycling initiatives or bike to work initiatives or using your Keep Cup. We're talking about the really, really big, ambitious changes to your company's core business activities. For those of you who are new to sustainability, you may be thinking, I don't really know the answer to this question. That's okay. Just write down some hunches, what you think the changes might be, or a sense of what you do know at this point. So we're going to give you a few minutes now to reflect on these questions and jot your answers in the middle of the canvas under the company goals section. We're now going to have a quick break, 5 minutes, I reckon. So now's the time. If you want to keep reflecting and gathering your thoughts, feel free to keep adding them to your canvas, or you can go grab a cup of tea, bathroom break, get up, stretch, move about, and we'll come back in 5 minutes. So at 1:16, we'll kick off again. Look forward to seeing you back here then.
People create businesses, people run businesses, and it's people like you that can change businesses. Employees are a key stakeholder group in the success of every company. And without them, companies are unable to offer anything to either their customers or their investors. Traditionally, Businesses have been driven by shareholder value, prioritizing profit above all else. Over the past few years, however, a shift has started to take place. Companies now need a license to operate that aligns with their stated purpose and values. Most of this change has historically come from external pressures, media scrutiny, government regulations, NGO campaigns. But now the dynamic is different. Employees are no longer just advocating for better working conditions. They're standing up for the planet and the issues that they care about. And hopefully, leaders are listening. 80% of C-suite leaders report that employee activism is a significant driver of corporate action on sustainability, and that employees have already impacted their sustainability plans or soon will. It's also becoming a big part of how companies attract and retain employees. More than ever, employees are demanding that their employers' values align with theirs, and we're seeing more and more evidence of this. It used to be that you turn up to work and you had to leave your real self at the door. But now employees are encouraged to bring their whole selves to work. So it's time to tap into this widespread desire from employees to see their companies step up on climate and the issues that they care about, and to use that collective power to drive action in the areas that it's needed most. Cam, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Lucy. At Work4Climate, we consider a climate leader to be anyone who takes the initiative to work within their organization to align it with the global climate goals. Some of you might be thinking, surely that's the responsibility of the sustainability team, right? But actually, there are many ways that you can influence for climate action in an organization, both from within as well as outside the sustainability team. So really, everyone and every single employee has the potential to be a climate leader. And I can't remember who dropped that, a comment similar to that into the chat, but yes, thank you for driving that home. So there are we think there are five main climate entrepreneur or climate leader archetypes. The first archetype is the practitioner. Now, this is someone who directly makes changes in their workplace, and they're often, but not always, tied to the job that they have. So you don't have to be in a sustainability role to be a practitioner. And actually, in fact, we'd like to see people across all business functions doing what they can, where they can, to apply this stuff to their workplace. For example, you could be a finance or benefits manager working to switch the default retirement fund of the company to a fossil fuel-free option, or you could be the government affairs person advocating on your company's behalf for more climate-friendly policy. The influencer is the second archetype, and there's someone who is influencing the decision makers and those who hold power. So they don't personally usually hold power or formal power in the business themselves, but they are good at influencing people who do. This might be informally through conversations that they have with senior and executive leadership, or more formally through mechanisms like sharing the results of an employee survey on concerns about insufficient climate action, or writing an open letter to your board and executives. The protector is our third archetype, and this is someone who holds positional power in the company, such as an executive or someone in senior management. They might control budgets or lead teams or set strategies. And they can create permission or protection for other climate leaders to try new things and make changes. This might look like dedicating budget or time to making changes, or allowing people to work on things side of desk, or possibly hosting climate-related training. The navigator is someone who doesn't necessarily have positional power, but uses the connections and experience and expertise to help other climate leaders find their way through the climate leadership journey. These are often really well-networked, very trusted people in the company. Or they can be mavericks, people who've created change, not necessarily climate-related change, but broader change in the organization before. And so they're really well placed to support others to make climate change. They might help climate leaders navigate internal channels and company politics. Or they might help climate leaders figure out their way forward via coaching or mentoring. Or they might make the right introductions to the right people at the right time, often people in power, both inside and outside of the organization. Great to see. Annie says, I can be a navigator. I see myself as a Wonder Woman. Fantastic. Annie, thank you. The final archetype is the organizer. And these are folks that naturally build networks of colleagues that then can become allies. And then they mobilize these allies to take direct action inside the company. And this is about building out collective employee power beyond what any single individual could do on their own. So I think that the key message I really want to drive home here is that one person can play multiple roles here. So you're not just stuck in one box. You might be a practitioner, or you might be a practitioner who's also well placed to influence decision makers, for example. So you're not just limited to one. So let's look at some real world examples of climate leaders. The first example is a total legend. His name's Drew Wilkinson, and he's an ex-Microsoft employee. And Drew and his colleague Holly Beale built a 10,000 strong sustainability community of employees across the world who started demanding meaningful action at Microsoft. This led to the company making really big changes and setting ambitious climate targets, including the goal to become climate negative by 2030. So a really solid example of an organizer there. Laura Wilson is our second example, and Laura is someone who completed our WorkforClimate Academy course last year, and she influenced the managing director of Specialized, the bike company that some of us know and love, to spark conversations in the cycling industry about fossil fuel sponsorship of sporting events. Final example is Bernie, and he's an example of a practitioner. And Bernie also completed the WorkforClimate Academy with us, and he works at Who Gives a Crap. When he started the course, Bernie was working in logistics at the company and had pretty minimal sustainability knowledge. But armed with the new knowledge he gained in the academy and a whole lot of determination, Bernie was soon transitioned into a full-time role in sustainability, where he helped steward a project to switch his company to 100% renewable energy. And that started with rooftop solar. He designed and delivered a pretty iconic project to put 190 solar panels on the roof of their warehouse. So that's some solid examples of real world climate leaders. This is a quote from one of these climate leaders. What I've learned is that I can be a facilitator. I don't have to be the expert, and I don't have to do it all myself. I need a team, people in different parts of the world with different experiences of the topic. So you don't have to have all the answers or all the information. It's about networking and influencing and facilitating. So would love at this point to pause and hear any questions that are bubbling up for people. I notice we don't have anything in the Q&A, but yeah, I want to take a couple of minutes just to clear some space for you. So what are you sitting on? What's coming up for you as we share this stuff about what your role might be?
And just a quick note on the Q&A, Lucy has gone through and written answers to many of those questions in there, which you should be able to see all the answers to for those who are also wondering. So you can have a look at those as well. They should still be there for you with Lucy's answers.
Yeah, I was beavering away whilst Cam was going through the last slides, trying to share resources and opinions and thoughts and ideas to answer some of those questions.
And they don't necessarily have to just be questions about your role. They could be broader questions as well. We've got a bit of time, so yeah, fire away. Okay, we've got a question here from someone. Now that you have described roles, the Academy is geared towards which type? Good question. We cover all of the types. So yeah, we welcome everyone regardless of where you sit on the 5 different types, and there's something for everyone really. I reckon we might move on, and if anything pops up, we can address it as we go.
Means.
Oh, question. Great question. What is the Academy? We're going to get into a bit more detail about that in a minute, but just briefly, it is a 12-week course dedicated to helping people early on in the stage of in the journey of climate leadership become the influencers in their company that they want to be to make those changes that you've all just written down in your empathy map. In your climate action map. Great question. More details coming soon. Sorry, Renee, looks like you're on mute.
Oh, I said the Academy is my baby. So if anyone wants to join us for the next Academy, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but we'll share a link as well later for what it is.
Cool. All right. Might hand over to Lucy then for the next piece around identifying your role.
Awesome. Thanks, Cam. I saw a couple of questions just came in as well, so we might answer those as we go a bit later, just acknowledging that I see you and we will get to them. We're going to spend a bit of time exploring which role you're best placed to play as a climate leader. So what we're going to do on this slide or on the next slide, you now are going to have 3 minutes or so to reflect on the following questions. Which archetype or archetypes, because you can be more than one of these, of climate leader am I well placed to be? What role can I play? What is mine to do? And I think this maybe goes to Grace's question in the Q&A, how to address burnout, overwhelm when you don't know which role you fit best into, feel like you don't have the support of others. Identifying what role can I play, what is mine to do, is probably the first step to addressing that overwhelm. So we'll get you to jot your thoughts down on the canvas under the My Role heading. We're going to take 3 minutes for you to do this, and then we'll move into breakout groups where you can share your reflections with a couple of other people. So we'll pop some music on and we will give you 3 minutes, and that prompt is in the chat as well.
I reckon now is probably a good time to transition over into breakouts. I'm just going to bring the music down. Hopefully that was enough time, but if not, it's all right. You'll have time to reflect with the group in a sec. So we're going to go into breakouts, and we'll be in groups of 4, and you'll have the opportunity to get to know a few other people here today, as well as share your reflections that you've just made in your canvas around the role that you think you're best placed to play. Thanks, Amanda, for coming along, and Rosie, really appreciate your attendance here today. So yeah, you'll have 10 minutes of the room. So spend a bit of time at the start, introducing yourself, getting to know each other, and then make sure you got enough time for each person to share your reflections. So probably about 2 minutes per person. This is a great opportunity for you to learn from others who might have similar challenges as well as similar opportunities. And we really hope you get some good ideas that you can then take back to your own canvas. So if our breakout rooms are ready to go, we'll open them up. And if you have any questions first before you go in, please drop them into the chat and I'll answer them before you head off. Okay. Cool. Hopefully those conversations were helpful and productive and you got some new ideas that you can pop into your canvas. I can see a few of you nodding, which is great feedback. Thank you. So we're going to do another activity shortly. And for the introverts in the room who are shrinking at thinking it's going to be a breakout, don't worry. No more breakouts from here on out. It's just going to be some quiet reflection time. But first, I really wanted to share this interesting visualization with you from the 2024 Deloitte Millennial and Gen Z survey. What really stood out to us here is that when asked about the top actions they want their organization to invest in to tackle climate change, employees highlighted training, helping employees make sustainable choices, and making offices greener. However, as we've discussed earlier, these actions are just the tip of the iceberg. So this reveals a bit of an awareness gap. If you're coming through unmuted, I'm just going to mute a few people I can see who've popped off mute. Apologies for that. Yeah, there's a lot more to meaningful climate action than what I've just mentioned. Hopefully after this session, you're considering how to make climate action your day job. You'll be focusing on more impactful systemic actions, the ones listed at the bottom of the chart. Things like working to transform the core business model or lobbying government. These kinds of changes are the ones that genuinely move the needle on climate and shift responsibility to where it belongs, which is back onto the systems and decisions that shape our organization and ultimately our world. So we've just hit you with a bunch of information. So we want to create a bit of space now for you to reflect quietly on what you've just learned. And to guide you through that, we've got these 2 questions. What's coming up for you when you think about making your job a climate job? What emotions, ideas, concerns, and questions? And secondly, how have your thoughts and feelings about working for climate changed, if at all, as a result of the session? So if you've got your canvas open, pop your thoughts and reflections down in the bottom right corner under learnings and reflections. And yeah, we'll give you a couple of minutes now for that.
Okay. So we're going to give you a chance in a moment to think about what your next steps might be. But first, we wanted to tell you all about the Work for Climate Academy. I know you've all been waiting for this. There's been questions in the chat, all keen to learn about the Academy, which, as I mentioned, is my baby. I'm the Academy Program Manager. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about this course because it is designed to be the perfect next step for employees at the start of their climate leadership journey. So over 13 weeks, 3 months, you'll learn practical tools and strategies and leadership skills tailored for climate action in the workplace. You'll connect with other like-minded employees who share your commitments and challenges and empower each other to make a difference. I could see in the chat, there's so much like, how can we make a community? We want to stay connected. The Academy is such a great place for this. And it's designed and delivered by experts in climate leadership, and you'll leave with a clear action to make tangible change in your organization. It also dives into a lot of the questions that you've asked today. There was a question around lobbying and advocacy. How do I do that? How do I help my company become 100% renewable? How do I learn the skills to create buy-in in my organization to create this change? We dive into all of that, and there's modules on all of that and a lot more. You have access to ongoing support through the alumni community and resources, and you're really joining more than just a course. It's a movement of leaders dedicated to reshaping industries from the inside out. Our next cohort kicks off in February, late February, but we do have limited spots available because we keep our cohorts relatively small. It's online, but it's still relatively small so that they can remain interactive. There's lots of breakouts, there's lots of time for discussion and questions, and we dive into some of these really important topics and themes. To make sure that you don't miss out, we're actually offering a special. Here's the pitch, a special for our people who have joined this webinar, where you can actually secure your spot early with just a $50 deposit. So if you sign up in the next week, so you've got a week to sign up, you just pay $50 now, and then you pay the remainder in February, but this secures your spot. Cam's just shared the link in the chat. You just enter the code deposit50 on checkout to secure that spot with just a $50 deposit. And then, yeah, you can pay the remainder in February when it's time to start the course. The price for corporates is $5.99. So I've just seen that in the chat. So that if your organization is paying, that's how much it is. If you're paying individually, it's $199. So it's significantly cheaper because we know that it's much harder individually. But that deposit code kind of exists for everybody. So you can pay that now, and then hopefully your organization might be able to pay for you. If not, it's $199. So we can move on to the final activity now, which is thinking about what are your next steps. Back to you, Cam. I'm looking forward to having so many of you joining me.
Thanks, Renee. And I saw there was a question from Pat, when is the deposit refundable until? And I believe it's refundable right up until the final week of the session, of the course, so commencing. All right, so let's jump into next steps. So we're going to give you a few minutes to reflect on this question. What are the next steps you need to take as a climate leader to initiate the changes needed in your company? We aren't talking about anything big or grand here, just a little step in the direction of making the goals that you wrote down in the center of your canvas happen. So is there a conversation you could have with someone at work, a community you could join, a book you've been meaning to read about this topic, or maybe you might like to enroll in a course like the Academy we just talked about? What's that first next step? It's also useful to bring to mind the role that you just identified in the previous activity, the role that you're best placed to play. And this is going to inform what your next steps might look like. So yeah, jot your thoughts down now in the section of the canvas called Next Steps. All right, so we've been through most sections of the canvas now. I've shared on the screen a version that we've completed just to give you some ideas, which we'll drop a link to in the chat. And we'll also send this out via email. We haven't walked through all of the sections here, so would love you to take a bit of time after this webinar to fill out the remaining sections. And if you run into any points where you're like, oh, I don't know how to answer this, reach out to us. We'd love to coach you through it. That's what we're here for. So definitely get in touch. Okay, so before we wrap up, we're really keen to know how likely you are to actually do something as a result of this session and as a result of what you've learned. So we're going to share a poll, and that'll pop up in your screen in a second, which is asking the question, how likely are you to implement your next steps on a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 is not likely at all and 10 is I'm definitely going to do this. So I'll just pull that poll up. Pretty good spread. but definitely skewed towards 10, the higher end, which is good to see. The majority are 8 and above, which is exciting and encouraging to see. So hopefully that means you will go away or most of you will go away and give it a shot. For those of you who are thinking, oh, I don't know about this and might have ranked a bit lower on the scorecard, so people maybe 7 and below, there's some prompts to help you think on and kind of surface what those barriers might be. So what prevented you from saying you were definitely going to implement your next steps? And what would it take to shift you closer to a 10? And Renee, if you could drop those questions in the chat, that would be great, just so people can reflect on them. All right, so we're at the end pretty much. I'm just going to hand over now to Renee to close us out.
Amazing. Thanks, Cam. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. It's been a whirlwind. There's lots of information here. We've done a lot of activities, but what we've shared is really just the tip of the iceberg. If you do want to take a deeper dive into employee climate leadership, please do consider joining us at the Academy course. And we've also got our playbooks in resources on the website you can dive into as well. But it's through the Academy where you'll get everything you need to know to drive real change in your organization. We're also looking to improve our learning experiences. So Lucy is going to share a survey in the chat, and we would love if you could take a couple of minutes to complete this survey. And it just helps us to make sure that these events are as best as they can be, as good as they can be. So thank you all so much. The engagement in the chat, the conversations, the breakouts, it's been such great energy, and we've loved having you all here. Thank you for coming, and we hope to see you at another event soon. Thanks so much, everybody.